They called it an integrated academy, but integration was a word that meant different things depending on which floor you lived on. In the shadow of Earth's gleaming orbital tethers, where rust-colored smog clung to buildings like a second skin, the old school stood, its anti-gravity lifts broken for 3 years, its staircases steep and unforgiving. 12 flights. Every single day. And every single day, a small girl with calloused hands and a patched uniform carried a boy the entire world assumed needed no help at all. His skin glowed blue like captured starlight. Hers was brown, marked with the kind of exhaustion that comes from waking before dawn. They climbed together in silence while hundreds of students flowed past them, some staring, most pretending not to see. But in that daily ritual of weight and trust, of muscles burning and breath coming hard, something was happening that would shake the foundations of an empire. Because Aisha Khan didn't know she was carrying a prince. She only knew he was her friend. And that, in the end, would be what changed everything. Before we start, subscribe now so you don't miss more incredible stories like this one. The alarm screamed at 4:30, the same as always. Aisha's hand shot out in the darkness, silencing it before it could wake her mother in the next room. Through the paper-thin walls of their housing unit, she could hear the hydraulic groan of the district's water system cycling on, the cough and sputter that meant they'd have pressure for exactly 45 minutes. She moved through her morning routine with the efficiency of someone who'd learned early that time was a luxury she couldn't afford. Cold water from a basin. Uniform pressed the night before. Hair tied back tight. The breakfast bar her mother had left out, chalky, fortified, tasting like cardboard and duty. Outside, New Jakarta's lower district was waking in shades of gray and amber. The sun hadn't reached them yet. It never did until nearly noon, blocked by the towers of the upper districts where the wealthy lived in climate-controlled luxury. Aisha walked past the food dispensary where her mother worked the first of her 3 jobs, past the repair shop where Mr. Hassan was already elbow-deep in someone's failing air filtration unit, past the small temple where Mrs. Okafor swept the steps every morning like ritual could clean away poverty. Oh, and before we dive in, tell us in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love hearing from you and always read every message. The academy sat at the border between districts, a deliberate statement of unity that worked better in speeches than in practice. It was old, built back when humanity first opened its doors to the galactic community, when integration meant throwing different species together and hoping friction would smooth into friendship. Sometimes it did. More often, it just meant new and creative ways to draw lines between us and them. Aisha climbed the front steps, these ones she climbed alone, and pushed through the heavy doors into the atrium. The building had been beautiful once. You could still see it in the bones. The soaring ceiling designed to accommodate avian students, the wide corridors built for Centauran quadrupeds, the climate zones that shifted every 50 feet to suit different biologies. But the anti-gravity lifts that should have made those 12 floors accessible had been broken for 3 years. Budget cuts, they said. Priorities, they said. The district council would get to it eventually. Eventually meant never, and everyone knew it. She found Kale where she always did, sitting on the bench near the broken fountain, his head bent over a data pad, blue light washing over blue skin. He looked up when she approached, and something in his expression shifted. Relief, maybe, or gratitude, or just recognition that his day was about to get a little bit easier. "Good morning," he said softly. His voice had a musical quality, an almost crystalline resonance that marked him as Valyrian. It was beautiful. It made him a target. "Morning," Aisha replied, slipping her pack off her shoulders and holding out her hand. "Ready?" He nodded, tucking his datapad away and bracing himself. This was the part that required trust. Kale stood with visible effort, his legs trembling with the weight they weren't designed to bear, and Aisha stepped into position. She'd figured out the mechanics through trial and error, her shoulder under his arm, her hand gripping his wrist, her other arm around his waist. Not quite carrying, not quite supporting. Something in between that let him keep his dignity while she bore most of the burden. The stairs stretched up into shadow. 12 flights. 144 steps. She'd counted. They started climbing. By the 2nd floor, her calves were burning. By the 4th, her breath came harder. Kale was small for a Valyrian, but he was still 12 years old and solid, and Aisha was small for a human. They paused at the landing and she felt him tense, trying to shift his weight off her. "I'm okay," she said quickly. "Just catching my breath." "Aisha." "I'm okay." They climbed. On the 6th floor, Marcus Chen and his friends were hanging out near the windows, the kind of kids who lived in the mid-districts and thought that made them important. Marcus saw them coming and grinned, the expression sharp and mean. "Hey look," he called out. "It's the charity case and her pet alien." His friends laughed. Kale's shoulders hunched, and Aisha felt him try to pull away, to spare her the association. She tightened her grip and kept walking. "What's wrong, blue boy?" Marcus continued, stepping into their path. "Daddy's diplomatic salary can't afford an anti-grav chair? Or maybe they just don't make them for rejects." "Move," Aisha said flatly. "Make me lower district." She looked at him, then really looked, and something in her expression made him step back. It wasn't anger. It was something colder, more exhausting. The look of someone who'd heard it all before and had decided his opinion wasn't worth the energy it would take to argue. They walked past. Marcus's laughter followed them up the stairs, but it sounded hollow, like he'd lost something in the exchange and didn't quite know what. By the 9th floor, Kale was breathing hard, small sounds of pain escaping despite his attempts to muffle them. Aisha knew better than to ask if he was okay. Instead, she started talking, filling the air with words to distract from the effort. "So I was thinking about our project," she said between breaths. "The immunology comparison. Professor Oren said we could use the lab's gene sequencer if we write up a proper proposal. I started drafting it last night." "Aisha." His voice was strained. "You don't have to. I want to. Besides, you're the one who figured out the protein folding patterns. I'm just good at talking fast and making it sound important." A soft sound that might have been a laugh. "You're good at more than that." "Yeah, I'm also excellent at climbing stairs." This time it was definitely a laugh, pained but real, and it carried them to the 10th floor. They reached their classroom on the 12th floor with 2 minutes to spare. Aisha helped Kale to his seat, front row near the door, the spot Professor Oren had quietly designated without making a fuss, and collapsed into her own chair beside him. Her legs felt like water. Her uniform was damp with sweat. She had 6 more hours of classes, then a shift at the community center teaching younger kids basic math, then homework, then maybe, if she was lucky, 5 hours of sleep before the alarm screamed again. But Kale was smiling at her, small and genuine, and that made it worth it. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that in 12 days, everything would change. In 12 days, their immunology project would take first place at the district science fair. In 12 days, they'd be selected for the Interspecies Youth Summit. And in 12 days, Aisha would learn that the boy she'd been carrying up those stairs every morning, the boy she'd defended from bullies and studied with and laughed with, wasn't just Kale. He was Prince Kaletherian Vas Zara, son of Empress Zara, heir to the Valyrian sovereignty, and his mother ruled 600 worlds. But that was 12 days away. Right now, Professor Oren was calling the class to order, his old Centauran eyes twinkling as he looked at his students, seeing more than most of them realized. "Today," he said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd watched empires rise and fall, "we're going to talk about the true measure of civilization. Not technology. Not conquest. But how we treat those who need us when no one is watching." Aisha pulled out her notebook, unaware that the lesson was meant for all of them. Especially her. The days developed a rhythm. Wake, wash, walk, climb, learn, teach, study, sleep. Repeat. Aisha's body adapted to the weight, her muscles developing the particular strength that comes from daily necessity. She learned the exact angle to distribute Kale's weight, the precise moment to pause for breath, the words to say when the pain in his legs got too bad and he needed distraction more than silence. They didn't talk about why she did it. The question hung between them sometimes, especially when they passed other students, humans and aliens alike, who looked at them with expressions ranging from pity to contempt. But Aisha never explained because she didn't think it needed explaining. He needed help. She could help. That was the entire equation. But the universe, it seemed, required more complex mathematics. It was a Tuesday when everything shifted. The morning had been routine, stairs, class, lab work, until Professor Oren announced that the district science fair projects were due in 3 days. Aisha and Kale had been working on their comparative immunology study for months, analyzing how different species' immune systems responded to the same viral threats. It was ambitious, maybe too ambitious for 12-year-olds, but Professor Oren had let them use the lab equipment after hours, and Kale had a way of looking at protein structures that made complex patterns suddenly simple. They stayed late that evening running final tests, calibrating results. The lab was empty except for them, filled with the soft hum of equipment and the blue glow of holographic displays. Aisha was inputting data when she noticed Kale had gone quiet. She looked over and found him staring at his hands, bioluminescent patterns under his skin flickering in distress. "What's wrong?" He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was so soft she almost missed it. "Do you know what they call me? In the Valyrian sections of the city?" Aisha set down her datapad. "What?" "Valshera." It means damaged goods. Defective. He laughed, bitter and young. My bones are wrong. Something in my genetic code didn't translate right when my parents... He stopped, swallowed. It doesn't matter. Point is, I'm broken. And back home, broken things get hidden away. You're not broken, Aisha said fiercely. Aisha. You're not. You're the smartest person in our class. You figured out the protein folding that Professor Oren said would take weeks. You taught me more about cellular biology in 3 months than I learned in 2 years. You're not broken, you're just... She struggled for words. You're just dealing with something hard. That's not the same thing. Cale looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his golden eyes. Why do you do it? He asked finally. Carry me. Defend me. You get nothing from it. Marcus is right. I'm just a burden. You could. Stop. Her voice cracked like a whip. Don't you dare. Don't you dare say you're a burden. And don't tell me what I could or couldn't do. I carry you because we're friends. Because it's the right thing to do. Because if our situations were reversed, you'd do it for me. Wouldn't you? In a heartbeat. Then stop questioning it. They went back to work, but something had shifted. A weight acknowledged. A bond strengthened. 3 days later, they presented their project at the district science fair. The auditorium was packed. Students, teachers, parents who could get time off work, district officials looking bored. Aisha and Cale stood at their station, poster board behind them covered in charts and data, their hands shaking with nerves and exhaustion. When the judges came by, Aisha did most of the talking. She'd learned early that people listened to her differently than they listened to Cale. Her words carried less suspicion, less assumption of privilege. It was unfair, but she'd weaponized it in his favor, learning to present their joint work in a way that made people hear the brilliance without the prejudice. The key discovery, she explained, pointing to a holographic display of protein structures, is that despite radical biological differences, all species show similar immune cascade patterns when responding to viral threats. The variance isn't in the fundamental response, but in the timing and intensity. Cale hypothesized that we could use this commonality to develop broad-spectrum treatments that work across species barriers. You hypothesized this? One of the judges, a stern human woman, interrupted, looking at Cale. He nodded, then found his voice. Yes, ma'am. The current medical model treats each species as isolated systems, but if you look at the evolutionary data, immune responses developed along parallel paths across completely different biologies. That suggests something fundamental about the nature of life itself, a pattern beneath the pattern. The judges exchanged glances. The stern woman made a note. When the winners were announced that evening, Aisha barely heard their names called for first place. The roar in her ears was too loud, her heart hammering too hard. Cale grabbed her hand and squeezed, and they walked up to receive their award together. A crystal trophy that caught the light and scattered it into rainbows, and a certificate announcing their selection for the Interspecies Youth Summit. This summit, the superintendent announced, reading from prepared remarks, brings together the brightest young minds from across the sector. It's held on Orbital Station Unity, hosted by representatives from all the major species. It's an honor for our district and for these 2 exceptional students. In the crowd, Aisha saw her mother standing, tears streaming down her face, hands clasped like prayer. She saw Professor Oren nodding slowly, satisfied. She saw Marcus Chen looking stunned, his usual sneer gone slack. What she didn't see was the small figure in the back of the auditorium, watching through a privacy screen, taking notes. She didn't see the encrypted transmission sent the moment their names were announced, or the way those 2 names, Aisha Khan and Cale, lit up screens 600 light-years away in a palace built from compressed diamond and political power. She didn't know that Empress Zara, ruler of the Valyrian sovereignty, had just learned that her son, the son she'd hidden on a backwater world to spare him the court's cruelty, had won a science competition with a human girl from the slums. But what happened next would change everything. The Interspecies Youth Summit was in 3 weeks. 3 weeks for the school to arrange transportation, for Aisha's mother to pull triple shifts to afford appropriate clothes, for Cale to quietly prepare himself for what he knew was coming. He didn't tell Aisha. How could he? How do you say, by the way, my mother is the most powerful being in 600 star systems, and I've been lying to you by omission every single day? How do you explain that you weren't sent here for diplomatic training like you'd implied, but exiled here because your condition embarrassed the royal family? That every day she carried you was an act of kindness you didn't deserve, given under false pretenses? You don't. You stay quiet. You let her believe you're just Cale, just her friend, just the kid who needs help with stairs. And you prepare for the moment when everything falls apart. The academy organized a send-off assembly. Aisha stood on stage, uncomfortable in borrowed formal clothes, while the superintendent gave a speech about pride and achievement and representation. She caught Cale's eye in the front row and pulled a face, making him laugh silently. That was what mattered. Not the speeches. Not the performance of pride from people who'd let the anti-gravity lifts stay broken for 3 years. Just that laugh. Just that connection. After the assembly, Professor Oren pulled them aside. I want to tell you both something, the old Centauran said, his 4 legs folding as he lowered himself to their eye level. In my 140 years, I've taught thousands of students. Most of them I forget. Some I remember fondly. A very few I know changed the world. He looked between them. You two are the latter. What you've done here, not the science though that's excellent, but how you've treated each other, that's the real achievement. Hold on to that. The summit can be complicated. Political. There will be people who want to make you symbols rather than seeing you as people. Don't let them. Aisha frowned. What do you mean? Professor Oren's ancient eyes were sad. You'll see. Just remember, the person matters more than the perception. Always. The journey to orbital station Unity took 6 hours on a public transport shuttle, packed with students from across the sector. Aisha pressed her face to the viewing port, watching Earth recede, then the moon, then the vast construction of the orbital stations that ring humanity's homeworld like jeweled bracelets. She'd never been off-planet before. The excitement made her dizzy. Cale sat beside her, quiet in a way that felt different than usual. Heavier. She bumped his shoulder with hers. You okay? Yeah. Just nervous. Me too. But we've got this. We already did the hard part, the work. This is just talking about it. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Right. Just talking. Orbital Station Unity was breathtaking. Built by the Cooperative Council 50 years ago, it was designed to be equally comfortable for all member species. Variable gravity zones, atmosphere sections, temperature-controlled districts. The architecture was stunning, all flowing curves and transparent aluminum, views of space everywhere you looked. Aisha felt very small and very, very poor. The students were sorted into delegation groups and assigned quarters. Aisha and Cale were placed with the Earth Valyrian Cultural Exchange Cohort, which meant sharing a suite with 6 other students. 4 humans, 2 Valyrians, all of them from upper districts or diplomatic families. The kind of kids who'd been off-planet before, who had clothes that fit properly, who didn't need to check price listings before ordering from the meal dispensers. The first session was that evening, a welcome reception in the Grand Hall. Aisha changed into her best clothes, still obviously cheap, still obviously patched, and met Cale outside the suite. He was wearing traditional Valyrian formal attire, deep blue fabric that made his skin luminescence more pronounced. He looked, she realized with a start, regal. You clean up nice, she teased, trying to lighten whatever weight he was carrying. Thanks. You too. They descended to the Grand Hall together. It was massive, filled with hundreds of students from dozens of species, the air translators working overtime to convert the babble of languages into something coherent. Banners hung from the ceiling representing different worlds and alliances. At the far end, on a raised platform, dignitaries sat in observation. The evening was a blur of introductions and small talk and feeling desperately out of place. Aisha stuck close to Cale and he to her, 2 outsiders clinging to familiar shore. They were examining a display about cross-species medical cooperation when a voice behind them made Cale go absolutely rigid. Prince Cale Therian. How lovely to see you here. Aisha turned. The woman who'd spoken was Valyrian, tall and elegant, wearing the kind of formal attire that probably cost more than Aisha's housing unit. Her smile was polite and venomous. Counselor Varys, Cale said quietly. Your mother will be so pleased to hear you're participating in educational activities, Counselor Varys continued, her tone making it clear she meant the opposite. Though I'm surprised to see you without proper support. Surely accommodations could have been made for your condition. I'm fine, Cale said. Of course you are. And this must be your project partner. She looked at Aisha like examining a bug. How charming. The Empress does love charitable initiatives. Aisha felt her temper flare. It's not charity. We're friends. Ah, friends. Counselor Varys' smile sharpened. How democratic. Well, I'm sure you'll both have a wonderful time. Do enjoy the summit, Prince. She swept away, leaving ice in her wake. Aisha rounded on Cale. Prince. He'd gone pale, bioluminescent patterns flickering erratically under his skin. Aisha. Did she just call you Prince? Around them, students were starting to notice. starting to whisper, starting to stare with new eyes, seeing not Kale their classmate but something else entirely. Someone else entirely. Can we go outside? Kale's voice cracked. Please? They pushed through the crowd to a balcony overlooking the station's garden level. Aisha's heart was hammering. Her mind was racing, trying to fit this new information into everything she knew, everything she'd assumed. Explain, she said. Kale gripped the railing, knuckles pale against blue skin. My mother is Empress Zara, ruler of the Valyrian sovereignty. I'm her youngest son. He swallowed hard. I was sent to Earth 3 years ago. Officially for diplomatic education. Really because I'm an embarrassment. My condition, it's genetic. Rare. Untreatable. In Valyrian culture, physical weakness it's shameful. Especially in the royal family. So they sent me away. Somewhere I wouldn't be seen. Wouldn't reflect poorly on them. Aisha's world tilted. You've been lying to me. No. I didn't tell you the whole truth, but I never lied. I am Kale. Everything we've done together, everything I've told you, that's real. I didn't tell you about the rest because... His voice broke. Because for the first time in my life, someone was treating me like a person instead of a title or a problem. You helped me because I needed help, not because I'm a prince. You defended me because we're friends, not because of who my mother is. That was everything to me. And I was terrified that if you knew, it would change. You'd see me differently. I'd what? Aisha interrupted. Treat you like everyone else does? Like Marcus does? Maybe. I don't know. I just couldn't risk losing the one real thing in my life. They stood in silence, the weight of revelation hanging between them. Aisha's emotions were a tangle, anger at the deception, understanding of the fear, confusion about what it all meant. She thought about the stairs. About Marcus's taunts. About Professor Oren's warning. Your mother, she said slowly. The Empress. She rules 600 worlds. Yes. And she sent you away because you have a disability. Yes. That's horrible. Kale laughed, sharp and pained. That's politics. No. Aisha turned to face him fully. That's cruelty. That's taking someone who's already struggling and making it worse because you care more about appearances than people. She stopped, overwhelmed. That's everything that's wrong with the way things work. I know. So what happens now? Are you going back? Is she here? She will be. Tomorrow. She's giving the keynote address. Kale's hands were shaking. She doesn't know I'm here. Or she didn't until Counselor Varys just sent her a message, which she definitely did. So tomorrow I get to stand in front of the entire summit while my mother acknowledges my existence for the first time in 3 years and pretends she's proud of me for political points. That's horrible? Yeah. He looked at her, golden eyes desperate. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I'm sorry I put you in this position. If you want to, I don't know, request a different partner for the presentation, or just pretend you don't know me for the rest of the summit, I'd understand. Aisha stared at him. At this boy she'd been carrying upstairs for months. At her friend. At the person who'd taught her about protein folding and made her laugh and trusted her with his weight every single morning. The person hadn't changed. The circumstances had. That was all. Don't be stupid, she said finally. We're doing the presentation together. We did the work together. And anyone who has a problem with that can fight me. Aisha. I mean it. I don't care if your mom is the Empress or the janitor or Ascension cloud of gas. You're Kale. You're my friend. That doesn't change. Something in his expression cracked. Relief and gratitude and disbelief all at once. Thank you, he whispered. Yeah, well, someone has to carry your dramatic ass around. He laughed, real and surprised, and the tension broke. But they both knew tomorrow would be harder. The morning of the keynote, Aisha woke early and couldn't get back to sleep. She lay in her bunk in the shared quarters, listening to the soft sounds of the station around her, and tried to prepare for what was coming. She'd looked up Empress Zara after they'd returned from the balcony. The woman was legendary, brilliant strategist, ruthless negotiator, had unified the fractious Valyrian systems through a combination of diplomacy and calculated force. Beautiful in the way powerful things are beautiful, remote and perfect and untouchable. And she'd sent her son away for being imperfect. Aisha's anger simmered. She'd grown up around casual cruelty, the kind that came from poverty and desperation, from people too tired and too scared to be kind. But this was different. This was cruelty from abundance. Cruelty from power. The kind that had no excuse. The keynote was at 10. At 9, Aisha found Kale in one of the meditation alcoves, sitting very still, his datapad showing what looked like official Valyrian court documents. "What are those?" she asked quietly. "Protocols. What I'm supposed to do when I see her. How I'm supposed to address her. The proper way to stand, speak, exist in her presence without embarrassing myself further." He looked up, exhausted. 3 years of freedom and 12 hours to remember how to be a prince. Aisha sat beside him. "Or you could just be yourself. That's not really an option. It is if you choose it. Aisha, you don't understand how this works. The politics, the expectations." "You're right, I don't. But I understand that you shouldn't have to pretend to be someone you're not to make your mom comfortable with the fact that you exist." She took his hand. "Whatever happens in there, I've got your back." "Okay." He squeezed her fingers. "Okay." The grand hall was packed for the keynote. Every student, every faculty member, every dignitary who could secure an invitation. Aisha and Kale sat with their Earth delegation, but she could feel eyes on them, whispers spreading. Everyone knew now. The prince and the poor girl. The story was too good not to tell. When Empress Zara entered, the room fell silent. She was magnificent. That was the only word for it. Tall and poised, her skin a deeper blue than Kale's, bioluminescent patterns like constellations moving beneath the surface. She wore formal robes that managed to be both elegant and authoritative, and she moved like someone who'd never doubted her right to command a room. She was also, Aisha noted with vicious satisfaction, looking directly at Kale with an expression of carefully controlled surprise. The speech was everything you'd expect. Carefully crafted remarks about cooperation, about the importance of youth leadership, about building bridges between species. Empress Zara was an excellent speaker, her words precisely calibrated to inspire without promising anything concrete. Aisha listened with half her attention, the other half watching Kale, who'd gone very still beside her. Then the Empress paused in her prepared remarks. "I've been informed," she said, and something in her tone made everyone sit up straighter, "that among our distinguished young scientists this year is my own son, Prince Kale Therian. I understand he and his partner have prepared an exceptional project on cross-species immunology." The room erupted in murmurs. Kale's hand found Aisha's under the seat, gripping hard. "I wonder," Empress Zara continued, her golden eyes fixed on their section, "if they might be willing to share their work with us now? An impromptu presentation for the benefit of all assembled." It wasn't a request. It was a command wrapped in diplomatic language. Professor Oren, sitting 2 rows behind them, leaned forward and whispered, "You don't have to." But Kale was already standing, pulling Aisha up with him. His face was pale but set. "Of course, Your Majesty," he said, his voice carrying. "We'd be honored." They made their way to the front of the hall, and Aisha felt every eye tracking them. Her heart was hammering. They hadn't prepared for this. Their presentation wasn't until tomorrow, their materials weren't loaded, they had nothing but their voices and their knowledge in each other. They reached the stage. Empress Zara was watching them with an expression Aisha couldn't read. Up close, the resemblance was obvious. Kale had her eyes, her bone structure, the same proud set to his shoulders when he forgot to hide it. "Proceed," the Empress said and sat down. Aisha looked at Kale. Kale looked at Aisha. And without speaking, they came to a silent agreement. They wouldn't perform. They'd just tell the truth. "Our project," Kale began, his voice steadier than Aisha expected, "started with a simple observation. At our academy on Earth, students from dozens of species learn together. We also get sick together. A viral outbreak last year affected humans, Valyrians, Centaurans, and Avians, 4 species with completely different biologies. But the progression of symptoms was similar. That made us wonder why." Aisha picked up the thread. "The standard medical model treats each species as a separate system. If a Valyrian gets sick, you use Valyrian medicine. If a human gets sick, you use human medicine. But what if that's inefficient? What if there are underlying patterns we're missing because we're so focused on differences that we ignore similarities?" They alternated, building the explanation, each filling in what the other left out. Without displays or data, they painted pictures with words. Protein structures like puzzles, immune responses like cascading waterfalls, evolution taking parallel paths across the galaxy because life, at its core, followed certain fundamental rules. "The implications," Kale said, "are significant. If we can develop broad-spectrum treatments that work across species barriers, we can revolutionize medical care, especially in integrated communities where specialists for every species aren't always available. But more than that," Aisha added, "it proves something important. We're not as different as we think we are. The things that keep us alive, that protect us, that make us who we are, they're more similar than not." We're all just trying to survive. To thrive. To exist in a universe that doesn't make it easy. She wasn't talking about medicine anymore. She knew it. Kale knew it. And from the way Empress Zara's eyes narrowed slightly, she knew it too. It sounds, the Empress said when they finished, like remarkable work. Tell me, Miss Khan, may I call you Aisha? Yes, Your Majesty. Tell me, Aisha. How did this partnership come about? The question was a trap. Aisha could feel it, could see it in the calculating intelligence behind those golden eyes. But she'd never been good at politics, never been good at saying what people wanted to hear instead of what was true. Kale needed help getting to class, she said simply. The anti-gravity lifts at our academy have been broken for 3 years. It's 12 flights of stairs. He can't climb them alone because of his condition. So I carry him. The silence in the hall was absolute. You carry him. The Empress's voice was carefully neutral. Every day. It's not a big deal. We're friends. Friends help each other. I see. And what do you get from this arrangement? The question was pointed, implying transaction, calculation, benefit. Aisha met the Empress's eyes directly. A friend. Someone who's brilliant and kind and makes me laugh. Someone who teaches me things and trusts me. Someone who sees me as a person, not just a poor kid from the lower districts. She paused. The same thing he gets from me. And you knew who he was? What he was. I found out yesterday. It doesn't change anything. Doesn't it? Empress Zara leaned forward slightly. You're telling me that discovering your friend is the heir to one of the most powerful entities in the galaxy doesn't affect your relationship at all? No, Your Majesty. Because Kale's still Kale. He's still the person who stays up too late reading medical journals and falls asleep in history class. He's still the person who figured out the protein folding patterns that saved our project. He's still my friend who needs help with stairs. The prince thing, she shrugged. That's just context. It explains some things like why people are meaner to him than they should be. But it doesn't change who he is. The Empress looked at her son. And you? What do you have to say? Kale straightened and Aisha saw him make a choice. Saw him decide which version of himself to be. I say that Aisha is the best person I've ever met, he said clearly. She helped me when no one else would. She defended me when others mocked. She treated me with kindness and dignity when I'd been taught to expect neither. She's brilliant and strong and doesn't care about things like status or power. She cares about people. About doing what's right. His voice shook slightly. She's everything I want to be and everything I'm grateful to know. And if that embarrasses you or the royal family, I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry enough to lie about it. The hall was so quiet Aisha could hear her own heartbeat. Empress Zara stood slowly, and Aisha realized with a start that the woman looked tired. The kind of tired that came from carrying weight for too long. 3 years ago, the Empress said, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall, I made a decision. I sent my son away because I believed I was protecting him from a court that would see his condition as weakness. I told myself it was temporary. That when he was older, stronger, he could return and take his place. She moved closer to them, and Aisha resisted the urge to step in front of Kale. What I didn't account for, the Empress continued, was that in trying to protect him from cruelty, I was participating in it. I was telling him that who he is wasn't enough. That he needed to hide to be acceptable. She looked at Aisha. It took a 12-year-old girl from Earth's lower district to show me what I should have known. That strength isn't about walking without help. It's about being brave enough to accept help. To trust someone with your vulnerability. To choose kindness over pride. She turned to Kale and for the first time, her carefully controlled expression cracked. I'm sorry, Kale. I failed you as a mother. I let politics and appearances matter more than your well-being. I can't undo that. But I can do better going forward. Kale's eyes were wide, disbelieving. Mother. You'll come home if you wish, or stay on Earth if you prefer. Either way, you'll have the resources and support you need. Proper medical care. Accommodations. Whatever will make your life easier. She paused. And Miss Khan's family will be compensated for her extraordinary service to the Valyrian royal family. No, Aisha said sharply. Everyone stared at her. I don't want compensation, she said. I don't want money for being Kale's friend. That makes it a transaction and it's not. It never was. Then what do you want? Empress Zara asked and she sounded genuinely curious. Aisha took a breath. In for a penny, in for a pound, as her mother said. I want the anti-gravity lifts at our academy fixed. I want students who need accommodations to get them without having to be secretly royal. I want kids from the lower districts to have the same chances as kids from the upper districts. I want, Her voice grew stronger. I want a galaxy where people help each other because it's the right thing to do, not because there might be a reward. Where kindness is normal instead of exceptional. Where no one has to hide who they are to be treated with dignity. She realized she was breathing hard, hands clenched into fists. The Empress was looking at her with something that might have been respect. Those, Empress Zara said slowly, are ambitious goals. I know. But someone has to care about them. The Empress smiled, small and real. Indeed. Very well, Miss Khan. The lifts at your academy will be repaired immediately. I'll also establish a fund for accessibility improvements at integrated schools across Earth. As for the rest, she looked out at the assembled students and dignitaries. That requires all of us. Choosing to see each other. To help each other. To value people over appearances. She placed a hand on Kale's shoulder, the gesture. Uncertain but genuine. Thank you both. For the science, yes. But more for the reminder of what we should be working toward. The hall erupted in applause. Aisha and Kale stood frozen, overwhelmed, unsure what had just happened. They'd gone up to give an impromptu presentation and somehow catalyzed something larger. As they left the stage, Professor Oren was waiting. I told you, he said, eyes twinkling. World changers. The rest of the summit passed in a blur. Their official presentation the next day was anticlimactic after the keynote drama, but they won their category. Aisha did 17 interviews with various news services, all asking the same questions about friendship and species cooperation and what she'd said to the Empress. Kale was constantly surrounded by people who suddenly wanted to know him, though Aisha noted with satisfaction that he kept coming back to her, anchoring himself in familiar shore. On the last evening they stood on the observation deck, watching Earth turn slowly below. So what happens now? Aisha asked. I go back to the academy with you, Kale said. Finish the school year. Then probably formal education on Valyria, but I can visit. And you'll visit us, Mother insisted. Your mom's intense. That's one word for it. He leaned against the railing. Aisha, I meant what I said up there. You're the best person I know. Stop, you'll make me cry, and I've done enough of that this week. I'm serious. You changed my life. You probably changed a lot of lives. You definitely changed my mother's perspective on about 6 different policies. I just told the truth. That's what made it powerful. He bumped her shoulder with his. Thank you. For everything. For the stairs. For the friendship. For defending me to the most powerful person in 600 star systems. Anytime. That's what friends do. They stood in comfortable silence, 2 kids from different worlds who'd found something rare and precious in each other. The universe stretched vast and infinite around them, full of possibilities neither had dreamed of weeks before. Below, on Earth, in New Jakarta's lower district, a crew was already at work repairing the anti-gravity lifts at the academy. They'd been funded by an imperial grant that arrived within hours of the Empress's promise. The district council, suddenly motivated, had expedited all the necessary permits. And in a small apartment with thin walls and careful hope, Fatima Khan received a message offering her a position at the new interspecies medical research facility that was breaking ground in the lower district. Better pay. Better hours. Better future. One act of kindness, multiplied by attention, by power, by will, rippling outward in ways Aisha couldn't have predicted. But that was still unfolding. Right now there was just this, 2 friends looking at stars, knowing that they'd been seen. 5 years later, Aisha Khan stood in the same grand hall on Orbital Station Unity, but this time she wasn't a nervous 12-year-old in borrowed clothes. She was 17, taller, confident in the way that came from surviving hard things and coming out stronger. She wore the uniform of the Interspecies Medical Academy, the prestigious program she'd been accepted to with recommendations from 3 empresses and 1 very proud Centauran professor. She was there to give a presentation on her continued research. The project she and Kale had started all those years ago had blossomed into a multi-species initiative that was revolutionizing medical treatment across integrated colonies. The broad-spectrum treatments they'd theorized were now in trials. The accessibility improvements they'd sparked had spread beyond Earth to dozens of worlds. But that wasn't why she was nervous. Kale was in the audience. She could see him in the front row, sitting without difficulty in a chair designed for his comfort, wearing formal Valyrian attire that marked him as crown prince and heir apparent. His condition had stabilized with proper treatment that had been developed partly from their own research. He still had difficult days, still needed support sometimes, but he was thriving. Beside him sat Empress Zara, who'd become an unexpected ally and mentor. She kept her promises and gone further, using Aisha and Kale's story as a catalyst for real policy change. The Valyrian sovereignty had reformed its approach to disability, to accessibility, to the value of different kinds of strength. It hadn't been perfect. Change never was. But it was real. Aisha delivered her presentation with a polish that came from practice, from knowing her material inside and out. She talked about protein structures and immune responses and medical innovations. But at the end, she deviated from her prepared remarks. Someone asked me recently, she said, if I ever regretted that day I decided to help a struggling classmate up a flight of stairs. If I knew then what I know now, the attention, the scrutiny, the way my life would change, would I still do it? She looked at Kale, who was smiling. The answer is yes. Because that's not actually the question. The question isn't whether extraordinary circumstances justify extraordinary kindness. It's whether we're willing to show ordinary kindness in ordinary circumstances, not knowing if anything will come of it. I helped Kale because he needed help and I could help. Everything else, the science, the policies, the attention, that's just what happened after. But it's not why. She paused, gathering her thoughts. We live in a galaxy of trillions of beings, thousands of species, infinite diversity. And the only way any of it works is if we choose to see each other, to help each other. Not because there's a reward, not because someone's watching, but because it's the right thing to do. Because we're all just trying to survive in a universe that doesn't make it easy. Because kindness should be normal, not exceptional. She smiled. So yeah, I do it again. Every single time. Because he's my friend. And that's enough. The applause was thunderous, but Aisha barely heard it. She was watching Kale stand, easily now, strong, and clap with genuine joy, pride radiating from every line of his body. After they met in the same balcony where she'd learned he was a prince, where everything had changed and nothing had changed at all. Good speech, he said. Thanks. Learned from the best. Professor Oren? Your mom, actually. She's terrifying when she wants to make a point. They laughed, comfortable in the way of people who'd walked through fire together and knew each other's hearts. I have something for you, Kale said. He pulled out a small box, opened it. Inside was a crystal pendant, the same material as the trophy they'd won 5 years ago. It's a Valyrian tradition. You give crystal to someone who's changed your life, whose kindness became part of your story. Aisha took it carefully, the crystal warm in her palm, catching light and scattering it into rainbows. I didn't do anything special, she said quietly. I know. That's what made it everything. They stood together, watching new students arrive for their own summit experience, young and nervous and full of potential. Somewhere down there was another kid who'd help someone. Another act of kindness that would ripple outward. Another story beginning. Think we changed things? Aisha asked. I think we started a conversation, Kale said. That's how everything changes. Someone starts. Someone else continues. Eventually, enough people are talking that the silence breaks. Poetic. Your mom write that for you? Shut up. He grinned. But probably. The galaxy turned around them, vast and complex and full of people trying their best. And in one small moment, on one station orbiting one planet, two friends stood together and knew that they'd done something rare. They'd chosen kindness when it cost them something and found that it cost them nothing at all. In the end, perhaps that was the real story. Not that Aisha Khan was extraordinary, but that she saw the extraordinary in someone the entire empire had dismissed. And in doing so, she proved what humanity had always known, that worth isn't measured in titles or bloodlines or perfectly functioning bodies. It's measured in how we treat each other when no one's watching. In whether we choose to help when help is needed. In whether we see people or just the surface of them. Aisha carried a disabled alien boy up 12 flights of stairs every day. Never knowing his mother ruled the galaxy. Never knowing her kindness would spark a movement. Never knowing she'd change the course of empires. She just knew he was her friend. And that, in the end, was everything. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out our next video about the human janitor who saved an alien princess everyone else had given up on. Tell us in the comments what you'd like to see next. We love hearing from you and we read every message. Until next time, remember, kindness isn't special because it's rare. It's special because you chose it. Thank you for watching.